time.
Okay, thank you all for coming. I'm calling to order the Medina City Council meeting for Monday, August 13th, 2018. Ms. Kellerman, would you call roll?
For the record, Councilmember Roger Frey is absent. Councilmember Jennifer Groen.
Here.
Councilmember David Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Alex Morcos.
Present.
Councilmember Sherry Wen.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Jessica Rossman.
Here.
And Mayor Cynthia Adkins.
Here. There's no objection to excusing Mr. Frey?
No objection.
Hearing no objection, Mr. Frey is excused. Any changes to the meeting agenda? Hearing none without objection, it is approved. Public comment period. I don't have any cards. Is there anyone who'd like to be heard? Okay, hearing none, we'll close the public comment period. Presentations. Ryan, are you going to kick us off, or is Mike going to introduce Roger?
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, Roger. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. So I hope that you all got a copy of the walkway evaluation study. And I'm going to make it very brief. Just kind of go over it, and if you have questions, we can address those. So what we did was we went and looked at all of your walkways, and we put together a GIS map that can be expanded in the future for other infrastructure things if you would like to do that. But GIS is a powerful tool for mapping and inventorying items. We put together the report, and in the report, it starts off just generally describing some of the characteristics, both structural and physical characteristics of walkways, just so that when we get into the discussion in the report and here tonight, you'll have a better understanding of some of the terms and the discussion, the direction of the discussions. But we didn't numerically score the walkways at all. That's something that you can do. It's not necessary, but we didn't do it on this one. And what we found was the city has a lot of walkways, mostly on one side of the street. Sometimes it's on both sides of the street. You've got a mix of asphalt, concrete, and some gravel trails. The shoulders of the roadway are paved in some places, but they are pretty narrow. The walkways generally are also narrow, 4 feet, maybe 4.5, 5 feet. They're older. There's a lot of tree root upheaval and some shifting of the panels that make them subject to tripping hazards. There's quite a few obstructions. There's cracks. It's typical stuff, basically, but what we did was we came up with some recommendations, and what we came up with was that you probably should fix your existing sidewalks before you embark on doing any new sidewalk projects. And fixing them would start with fixing the hazards, and I think Ryan's already started on that. He's done one round, I think, of sidewalk grinding for tripping hazards, and he's got 2 more in store. There's the next step would be to look at removing obstructions. That would be something as simple as vegetation trimming, but something more complicated is moving utility poles out of the middle of the sidewalk, or what might be easier in a lot of cases is moving the sidewalk around the utility pole, depending on the type of pole that it is. To install ramps in places where you don't have any ramps, there are a few of those. The next step would be to replace ramps that are not compliant with ADA. The last step, or the second to last step, would be to replace sidewalks that don't have as much utility because of their width or lack of ADA compliance. And then the last recommendation on the list would be to try and build new sidewalks where you think you need new sidewalks. And those last 3 would be to also pursue grants, to continue to pursue grants, whether it be through TIB or other sources, to help you fund those types of projects. And the last thing in the report is a table where we looked at about 7 or 8 streets that have walkways on them that we would consider to be a top priority. They're not in any particular order. We kind of put them in roughly what we thought, but it's at the council's pleasure which one what actions to take, if any, and which ones to take first. And if you wanted to add or subtract to that list, that's more than within your purview. So that's basically the report, and I'll address any kind of questions or comments now.
So thank you very much for coming back with this detail and doing such a thorough job. Questions for Roger? Comments for Roger?
So you're saying most of our sidewalks are not ADA, whether it's the width or the curb or getting on the street from the sidewalk. What's the history of ADA? Did it come after the sidewalks? Can you give us like a brief explanation?
Yeah, I
of
don't
what to
remember when
expect?
ADA was adopted, but it was either in the 60s or the 70s, and the requirements of ADA have morphed tremendously over the years, especially in the last 15 years. A lot of places you can see a ramp that was built that has kind of a diamond pattern in it, where they used to just pour it like a sidewalk, and then they would take a steel screen that had that diamond pattern and push it in there, and that kind of roughened it up a little bit for traction, not necessarily for visibility. What you have today is you have the truncated domes, which are usually in white or yellow. So there's a texture, and there's also a visibility component to that to assist people who are visually impaired. About probably 5 to 8 years ago, WashDOT finally kind of settled on what their interpretation of ADA is and what they're going to require on all of their projects. So the standards haven't changed much in the last 5 or 8 years, but before that they were changing fairly often. And I would say that most of your sidewalks were built long before ADA became, a stressed item for cities to work on.
So what's the grandfather? What needs to be changed urgently versus what you can leave as is until you have to do some construction? Typically in existing buildings, for example, they're not ADA. But then if you do any significant remodel or change, then you have to be ADA approved.
Right.
How does that apply to sidewalks in the city? What are the implications if somebody trips on a sidewalk and they accuse the city that your sidewalks are not ADA?
It's similar to buildings in that you're not necessarily required to do anything until there's an upgrade. However, you can be sued by a third party that would force you into a compliance program. Some of the larger cities like Bellevue and Redmond, they're in those programs where somebody has sued the city and said, you've got 15,000 ramps and 14,900 of them are not compliant, and then the city has to come up with, okay, we're going to fix 1,000 of them a year, and they start on it. And you can get development to fix some of them. If you've got other types of projects, like if you impact a crossing, a roadway crossing in any way, whether it's just a simple pavement overlay, or you just want to redo some curves or some storm drainage, you have to upgrade the ramps and the crossing. And as far as the sidewalks, the biggest emphasis is on the ramps, and so the sidewalks don't get targeted very often for replacement. But yeah, if somebody were to trip on a sidewalk, I don't know that you would get an ADA type of issue as much as you would just get a citizen complaint about a hazard and a liability issue. But there's no statutory requirement that says that every city has to have every walkway compliant by X date. There's no requirement of that.
I have other questions, but if somebody wants.
Yeah, I have questions. I think the state have a grant for sidewalk or bike around the schools, or walk to school, bike to school. It's possible you can segment out on those close to certain feet toward the school to see whether we can put some application in, and that will be integrated to have build a nicer walkways and bikeway together that way and save our money.
Yeah, there is a lot of grant opportunities out there. We currently have an application in for 12th Street to replace that sidewalk, and also to do some bulb outs around the utility poles and things of that nature. And I just gave Ryan a grant today to do some overlay projects under TIB. The Northeast 12th grant is a federal grant.
Yeah.
And they do have arterial improvement grants. They have walkway to safe routes to school grants. They have ADA walkway compliance grants. There's quite a few different sources, and the cycles for those come about at different times, and the requirements are are different for each one.
So it's possible you can segment them out to save our city's money to do those
Absolutely. Oh,
things.
yeah, absolutely. I would recommend that whenever there's a grant opportunity, you go for
And
it.
the other things is for the Christian school on the 78, and that's also the bike road from the Evergreen when they get out and go to the 84 for the bike.
Mhm.
And that also have a school there.
Right?
So it'll be a nice, beautiful project to do a grant for
Yeah,
us to school.
those grants are, the Safe Routes to School is a competitive grant program.
Yeah,
So if you don't have a sidewalk, you rate really, really high. If you have a sidewalk, it's just not exactly what everybody wants, you don't rate near as high. And you're competing against places that don't have sidewalks. So they're kind of hard to get.
yeah.
And it also matters on the traffic volume. If you have a lot of cars, no walkways, and lots of kids, you rate very high.
Yeah, we have
Yep.
lots of cars because the parents drive kids over, and also it's very the bike the not really a walkway, it's just a big road.
The trail, yeah.
Yeah, so if we put that some kind of plan or grant together to look at those things, will save us lots of money and then build a very nice trail that people can bike instead bike through Evergreen down south, and then you can bike through that trails to the 84 with nice new
Right.
new bikeway. It will be much safer because right now the the bike traffic increase a lot on the Evergreen. It's a little difficult for the safe driving.
Okay, so you'll look into the grants for us.
Yeah, and
Okay.
one of the things that our firm does is we'll do grant applications at no cost for the city.
Oh,
We do
great.
that-
Oh, great.
We do that for all our clients.
Uh-huh.
So we've helped Ryan with the last 3 years of TIB grants and some other grants. too.
Okay,
We're always
thank you.
looking out for that for our clients.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Sheree.
I have a question about, the table 2 with the recommended improvements. I'm wondering what went into the recommendation in terms of risk analysis. And I'm asking in part because I notice a couple of these are cul-de-sacs, which are probably not places where as many people walk through.
Correct?
So did you use, for example, a sliding scale, like it's really bad, and so even though only 5 people walk here, it's so bad that we really need, I'm just trying to get a handle on how those recommendations were considered.
They were qualitatively done. We didn't numerically score them. I originally just kind of listed them based upon what I saw. And then somebody did exactly what you did, was they said, well, the cul-de-sacs don't carry much traffic, so you should put those at the bottom because it impacts the fewer number of people. So I was looking at streets that have major issues with hazards and also the use of the sidewalk or trail, whatever it might be. In Evergreen, that's a very busy road for pedestrians and bikes and cars, and 77th, a little harder read on that one for me, but it seemed like it was a busier street that would have pedestrians that would be using the sidewalk versus walking on the shoulder or something like that. So it was somewhat qualitative.
So they're ranked in order in a way that accounts traffic, but the list originally came from the scale of the hazard?
No, we didn't numerically score it.
Or,
I
well-
simply looked at the roads and said, wow, this one has a lot of issues. Put it on the list, and I listed all those. I mean, I wasn't going to list every single road. If there was a 500-foot section that had one crack, I wasn't going to put it on the list because the paragraph preceding table 2, it talks about spot repairs. So if you happen to have, like on 28th in front of the Christian school, there's one place where it looks like a truck backed over the sidewalk. There's like 4 panels that are broken. The rest of the sidewalk is almost perfect. So I wouldn't put that street on the list because it's got one spot repair.
So is it fair to say then these are best bang for your buck based on damage and use?
Not necessarily the best bang for the buck, but more like the most heavily degraded walkway.
Okay.
you had to redo it based upon most use, would you be able to do that?
I suppose if the city had pedestrian use numbers and traffic counts, you could combine the two into a numerical score that would discuss the impacts to pedestrians based upon the volume of cars if they don't have a safe place to walk. You could do some kind of scoring like that.
Which is Evergreen Point Road, because everybody walks in the street.
Yeah, Evergreen Point Road, the sidewalk's narrow. It's got lots of tripping hazards. It's got lots of vegetation and utility encroachments. And so when I drive in and out of here, and I ride my bike here every once in a while just because it's a good distance for me to ride, but I do see a lot of people walking in the street on Evergreen Point Road.
Okay, and I just want to understand the list, so I'm still on that. It has nothing to do with, for example, litigation risk to the city or any sort of things that appear like someone might say they should have been done. That's just about how damaged the sidewalk is.
Yeah, I suppose you could say that. I mean, I've stopped guessing what people will get upset about and sue about because I'm always wrong. So, obviously Evergreen Point Road probably has the highest volume of pedestrians and it's probably one of your worst sidewalks. Could it be on the top of the list instead of 77th? Sure, because these are not necessarily in a prioritized list,
Okay.
other than the fact that I moved the cul-de-sacs to the bottom.
Have you considered the wheelchair accessible on the sidewalk?
I did not consider wheelchair accessibility on the sidewalk. We only identified whether it was ADA compliant or not. And one of the ADA criteria for a sidewalk is the cross slope can be no greater than 2%.
Right.
But I think we can all agree that if it were 2.1%, people are not going to die. It's a standard. It used to have some variability in it. Like if you did a project and you told the contractor to build a sidewalk at 2% and you go out and you measure it afterwards with a smart level and it ends up being 2.2%, nobody cared. Now, if it's a TIB project or a WashDOT project, they make you tear the sidewalk out. And so now everybody's design plans say 1.5%, because then if the contractor messes up and it's 1.8, it's okay. Personally, I think that if the standard is 2%, that there should be some tolerance, maybe plus or minus 10%, so 2.2 to 1.8 is what you want, but that's not the way the funding agencies see it. So.
Okay. Before we leave, do you have a follow-up?
No, I think I understand better now. Thank you.
Okay. David, you haven't had a chance
Yeah,
yet?
just quickly, from a design standpoint, do you see like other cities or other research that's being done in terms of changes or recommendations coming down? I'm looking from a future standpoint in terms of what other standards that might be coming down the pipeline in 20, 30 years. So I'm looking at this from like if we're going to be replacing it, let's think about replacing it for the future as well. So are there changes or recommendations in terms of the material being used or in terms of design, the widths for say wheelchairs, ADAs, or even from a technology standpoint, segways or so? I'm just thinking out the top of my head. I'd love your feedback on this.
I don't have much for you in that. There's been a move for people to build plaza areas out of pavers and things like that. Like if you go to Europe, they're everywhere. Everything's a plaza-type stone surface. Those have a tendency to get uneven for obvious reasons because they're not a solid surface that's connected. They're all bedded in sand or something like that. And I think some cities are going away from that because of potentially the future. I mean, for one, they're usually more expensive than just concrete. But then if you have to keep pulling them out and maintaining them and making them smooth for ADA reasons, it becomes a burden, a financial burden. So cities are moving away from that. But otherwise, I don't think that there's any kind of magical material that anybody's looking at. Generally, cities are thinking about going a little wider. Like 5 foot's been the standard for a long time, just because to have 2 wheelchairs pass, you need 5 feet. But some places are going with 6. if you're near like a high school where you have a high volume of pedestrians, whether it be during a football game or, some parent-teacher conference day or Christmas party or whatever, they're putting in 8-foot sidewalks. But, it just, there's really no direction. And I think unless the feds change ADA, I don't think Washot's going to make any more changes. I think they've made enough changes in the last 20 years, and I think everybody's pretty much set on the ramp designs. There are some innovative products out there, like most truncated domes are either white or yellow, but there's also companies that are now making cast iron truncated domes, which are black, which you still have a color contrast between a gray sidewalk and a black surface, but they last a lot longer than a plastic dome system. You don't see them here much. You do see them in Southwest some, and that may be just because it's drier down there and they don't corrode as fast. But so there's a few innovative products, but I don't know that the dimensional standards are going to change much in the near future.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, that's it.
So based on this comprehensive list, how many of these projects do you think, are you going to bite them off year by year? What's the recommendation?
I have quite a few of them. I think in the next CIP, I had 3 or 4 years in a row where we're working just on ADA sidewalk upgrades. I think we're going to focus a lot on capital improvements sidewalks, especially where ramp upgrades.
And fixing the hazards?
Yeah.
I mean, are you in agreement that fixing hazards first is the priority
All
and then?
the chirp hazards will be fixed this year,
Oh.
except for the major, upkeep that we have to get rid of in place, and we'll work back in with the ADA upgrades.
Okay, let's go around again. Alex?
When a property is being redeveloped, I think the question is not maybe to you, but to Mike or Steve, who's not here. What are the requirements when you're building a new home as far as the sidewalk in front of that house? Assuming the sidewalk is not ADA compliant in that area. It's 3 feet wide, 2 feet wide. But now you're building a house. Are you required to build a new sidewalk that's 5 feet according to the standard? How do we deal with that? That seems to be some...
We don't have, currently we don't have a code that requires developers or home builders to do frontage improvements. Like in Bellevue, they're required to do frontage improvements.
Right, that's what the project mentioned.
That's part of the code. That's something we should probably think about.
So that's maybe something we counsel or we should think about, because otherwise things don't get improved. And when you build in Bellevue, they force you to do a lot of things, and this is how you improve the community.
But we don't even require the homeowner, they cut it in front of their utilities. We don't even require them to, pave the whole street. They have
Right.
these,
So they only have
2 or 3
patches.
flats,
Right,
and
sure.
It ruins our streets.
I'm not suggesting it's fun to deal with Bellevue to do that, but it's something to consider, because sometimes it's a requirement. I mean, we had issues with the city of Bellevue where the transportation department care about ADA and how people walk on the sidewalks. The land use, they care about aesthetics, and they didn't agree.
Yeah.
And they wanted a very nice kind of surface, and the transportation said, hell no, we cannot accept that because ADA. So sometimes they have conflicts.
Yes.
But I
Well,
think we should consider something like that.
the other thing with that is that a really nice improvement that gets turned over to the city, it becomes yours. And you would like it to be the same as some of your other facilities with respect to maintenance, operations, and costs. Because, if a developer wants to build a gold-plated sidewalk, that's great. But if it's going to cost you $1 million to replace 10 feet of it 5 years from now, that's not so great.
All right.
Sheree, anything more?
It's possible you can make some plan about which part you can count as what kind of grant, so we have a list of what your intentions are. So it helps us to think about, without those grant support, what do we need to do with the rest, and then we
Without
can do
grant
it.
support, you want to know how much it would cost to.
Exactly.
Actually, I believe it's in the tax. I think Roger has.
We need to have to the budget next year as well.
We don't have enough in the budget. in my capital, I usually allow about 500,000 a year.
Uh-huh,
And I believe I'm doing about 200,000 to 300,000 a year in
yeah,
sidewalk upgrades.
yeah. But on the meantime, I'm saying it will be a very good opportunity for us right now to plan ahead, so we get certain grant coming, so we don't spend too much on that part at home.
Yeah, I can go over the CIP with you if you'd like.
Yeah,
There's how I
sure, that'd be great. Yeah, that's good.
Jennifer? Jessica? Follow-up? Okay, David?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Really appreciate your work on this. Thank you both. Mr. Blasey, Park Board. And thank you very much for you and Sean coming to all of the Medina events and all your community support.
I will talk about that. Since we didn't have a meeting, let me make sure I can put this thing down.
So Drew and Sean Blasey were at every Medina Days event.
Question, that's impressive.
It really was. And their grandkids came too, so fun was had by all.
You must have been there as well.
Yes.
You knew that they were there.
Yes.
It was really fun. It was a good Medina Days. Fireworks show was great.
Yeah.
I think Mike and the police department and the public works department deserve a day off. They were burning the candle at both ends for us.
Do we give the people who organize that, like, accommodation, right?
We need to, yeah,
Yeah.
before they go back to school.
Which is probably
Which
soon.
is already, too late for some.
I wasn't sure if they would want to come to a meeting, but I think we should.
We tried last year, they didn't want to
Yeah,
do that.
they didn't want to, believe it or not everybody thinks it's a great big thank you to come to a city council.
They don't have to come, we could just send it to them. How about
But
that?
you sent
we
them
never
something,
came.
didn't you, last year?
Yeah, some of
This
them.
isn't exactly the teenager's idea of fun.
I told Cole it.
Especially after a whole week of work, they're pretty exhausted too.
After you organize all that too, you get a lot of comments and questions and things, and so, at least when I was doing it, I
Oh,
didn't
that's
know.
adorable.
Yeah.
Okay, technical glitch.
In 10 minutes out.
The park board doesn't meet in July, but we had a major park project going on. These are my two grandchildren. It's very hot summer, and I recruited them, as I mentioned, to water the plants up at Fairweather. So
Thank you very much.
they earn their keep. Speaking of grandchildren, I do want to say that they had a wonderful time at Medina Days. For those that participated, I thought the city did a great job. The mayor was there, the city manager was there, the police department did a great job with the parade and the carnival. My grandkids had an absolute ball at the block party that Sean Schubring sponsored up at his house. The fireworks went off without a hitch, so I thought, and Public Works, Ryan, I saw him and his crew was there for the parade primarily, but it was a well-staffed event. Other city council members as well, yes, indeed. But my grandkids are voting for another Medina Days, just so you know. Anyway, any questions?
No, thank you for rotating through to do that watering. Really appreciate it.
It was so hot this summer. We had 2 heat waves, really. So we had them for a week, and it was our week to water, so I recruited them. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Planning Commission is not meeting, so there's no update, but I would like to just make a public shout out to the Shubrings. They were generously hosted a wonderful community event on Friday night, and didn't you think it was really great?
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. And anything from emergency preparedness?
September is Emergency Preparedness Month, so I'm working with Kay and communications group. So We put together 4 messages we're going to send out the Monday of each week just to help people get prepared. And then the second piece, and I wish they were here, shout out to the radio group. They do every 5th Saturday, when there's a 5th Saturday in a month, the HAM group gets together and they do a radio test where they communicate with Bellevue, King County EOC, and even Camp Murray, which is the state. They identified some equipment needs, low cost, didn't cost the city much, but they're a volunteer group, and there's about, you all have radios and they do the tests, but in a small community like ours, they're going to be very valuable if something does happen. So, and I appreciate them, they don't ask for much, but what they do is usually pretty relevant to what's going to happen in our community. So that's all I got.
Yeah, and Rosalie did a great job of running the agenda, or the count-in.
She's neat. She's very enthusiastic about it. So she's been on the committee for about 3 years now.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Unless there's any objection, the consent agenda is approved. Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. Move to the public hearing for the utility tax amendment. Ms. Ketter, is that you? Okay, thank you. Mr. Massal, is there some script that I should be reading in order to open the public hearing, or can I just open the public hearing?
Yes, you should just open the public hearing, and when the presentation is over and the public has spoken, you can close it and include deliberations or not as you choose within the scope of the public hearing.
Okay, we'll open the public hearing. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome. Lovely view behind you. So, real briefly, I'm just here to outline and kind of get us caught up with where we are, what we've talked about regarding this agenda bill. Mainly, it'll be review for you folks, but for any members of the public who want to kind of get a flavor for what this is. We've been having sessions for long-term financial planning over the last several months. One of the things that has come up is finding additional revenue sources. The council tasked staff to analyze different, as Roger would put it, different dials we can turn that are still available to us since we don't have a Costco opening up on the corner, big cash cow sitting on our property. What else can we do? One of the things that came up was what we still had left in the tool belt for utility taxes. Up until recently, it was a commonly held practice that one government couldn't tax utilities that were owned by another one. So specific to Medina, Medina could not tax the Bellevue water and sewer utilities. Recent court cases have clarified that to be, yes, you can. So we did an analysis as to what that would do for us. It would raise effectively about $180,000 a year, which would average out to be $195 a year for per household. But as we discussed in our planning sessions, it wouldn't be evenly weighted. It would be more heavily weighted towards folks who had extensive landscaping or summer watering needs, a pool, that sort of thing. So just on basic utility use, the typical resident would experience much less than that average. And also I was asked, I've forgotten which council member asked me that, it may have been Cindy, to look into discounts that low income and seniors could qualify for. The City of Bellevue actually already has a program in place, and their program would just, it reduces the gross amount that the qualifying individuals would be paying, so therefore the percentage of the tax would flow through with it. So it would impact the tax collection as well, so they'd have reduced taxes by association. So the agenda bill was to capture the two things we talked about, that to bring in the water and sewer utilities, and then also to discontinue the sunsetting of the utility ordinance every year. When the utility taxes were reinstated several years back, the council at the time thought it was going to be a one-year need, and it has been an every-year need since then. On an administrative level, it is honestly, frankly, a hassle to reinform all the utilities year over year that, no, we're not expiring after all, we've renewed it. And there's a lot of administrative effort that's put forth to making sure that everyone gets the message, and we end up having to collect back taxes. And do we need to turn down the air conditioning?
Yes.
It's cold.
I'm noticing a couple people.
Are you freezing?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Julie.
Okay, and with, that's all I had to say, just to bring us up with where we're at and the goals for this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Can I ask a qualification question before the debate? $195 per household. This is the addition for water and sewer,
Correct.
or including electricity as well, or the other utilities that we were paying?
They're already in the mix. This was the only utility that we had that we could levy that we hadn't.
Yeah, I know, but as a homeowner, are we saying they're going to be paying $195 for all of utilities, or
No,
just for
no.
water and sewer?
That's the additional that we
The
cover.
addition.
The addition for
What is how much would they pay total when you count cable, TV, whatever we charge for electricity and water and sewer?
I'd have to get back with you on that answer.
Okay.
Didn't come prepared for that one, sorry.
Since it's difficult to calculate because they're all based on usage and a percentage of the bill. So, we could make some reasonable assumptions about how much electricity people use and how much, whether or not you have showtime, so you pay more on the cable. I mean, we can make some assumptions like that and come back with a number to you. But, whatever number we give you is just going to be that with
No,
a bunch
just
of
as an
assumptions.
estimate.
It's not
Just
gonna
like we
be-
have
And-
195,
yeah.
I wanted to know if it's only water,
Yeah.
sewer,
Right,
or everything. So you're saying not everything.
right.
So when you add the other
Right.
TV and power, is that double? Is that
Yeah.
300, 400 a
Yeah.
month, a year?
Other cities I have that I've seen that have addressed this question, what they've done is put together kind of a example household that, this, this number of people, this number of square footage, assuming they have these optional cable add-ons, whatever, what their total would be. And then it just gives you kind of a flavor and a feel, because, no two are going to match.
And Julie, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's my understanding that the way that we came up with 195 for water and sewer is we went to Bellevue Utilities and said, what's the total amount that goes to Medina? What's the effect of the tax rate? 1,100 houses, do the math.
Yeah, exactly.
So, again, you may never find a single house that's paying exactly $195. It's just,
Right. And that, that's exactly how it was done. I get quarterly reports from them already because of the franchise fee. And from that, I knew what their gross revenues were. And it was just a matter of doing the math, that times the rate divided by, as Michael said, 1,100, and that's where the 195 came from.
Could you bring everybody up to speed on the parts of this that are already part of the code that we're just reaffirming?
I'm sorry, could you repeat your question?
Wasn't there was part of this that was passed years ago, but we just didn't start collecting it?
it's talking about the
Oh,
garbage.
that was just administrative instructions. There was no change to the ordinance as far as that went, and it's not factored into the numbers.
Okay.
I mean, we have for budget purposes, but the direction from the council, it was already in the ordinance.
Right.
It just, at one point, was opted not to be collected, and you said, yeah, there should be no reason why we shouldn't be collecting this on the garbage, I think is what you're thinking.
Okay, thank you.
Why are we going for 6%?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Why are we doing 6% and raising people an average of 200 a year?
6% is the rate that all the rest of them are, and that is the maximum amount that we can do, and beyond that, we have to go to a ballot of the people to raise it more than that.
Why wouldn't we try something lower and see how that works?
We definitely could. We actually tried that experiment a few years ago with just the basic utility tax ordinance that we have already. They dropped it down to 4%. didn't hear anything, brought it back up to 6, no one said anything, there was no, there was no pushback.
I
one
just
way or the
find
other.
$200 more for an average resident here to be a lot, given how much everything else is going up. So I would like us to think about a lower percentage.
Okay, well, that's something that can be discussed in the council.
I don't know if we ever really discussed the number, which is why I asked
Okay.
tonight.
So I need to be thoughtful about the order we go in. Mr. Massal, should I be moving for public comment?
The council can engage in question and answers with the presenter and with the public as they appear. It's essentially your hearing, and you should run it to obtain the maximum benefit of inquiring of people about statements they're making.
Is there anyone from the public who'd like to be heard? Yes, please come forward.
I'm not sure if this is the time. I heard that the planning commission is not meeting tonight.
Oh, are you going to talk about the utility tax?
No, not about that, but I'm not sure when I should interrupt.
Okay,
So
we'll call for.
I am from the public.
We'll call for.
I'm a neighbor.
Okay, this is right now, we're just doing the public hearing on this particular ordinance.
Thank you. Let
So,
me know when it's my turn.
okay, okay, thank you.
Is that one?
Please come up. Yes, please. Could you state your name for the record?
My name is Connie Gerlitz. I live on 78th. And thank you, Madam Councilperson. Just because people are not coming to you and bitching about their taxes doesn't mean that we're not bitching about the taxes. It doesn't mean that you just need to just go for the max because nobody comes in and bitches. I mean, do we need this? How much of it do we need? I mean, yeah, we can always use the money, but do we really need to have a blue sidewalk here instead of the gray one? I mean, do we really need that? Do we really need to? I can afford it, but I don't want to afford it. I don't, okay. Just be thoughtful about the amount that you raise. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. She wants to speak about construction. Any other public comments for this hearing? Any other comments and questions for Julie?
I didn't get a turn for that. So yes, Julie, can you come back, please?
Right, that's what I was saying.
I wanted to go back to the 195 because I heard the exchange about how that was figured out mathematically. And I am wondering if that is, if that number has anything to do with anything, honestly, because I'm thinking about some of the properties in the city and the scale of them.
Right.
And the kind of landscaping that peeks around from behind some of the fences.
Yeah.
And I know that, for example, the sales price of those properties would give a completely inaccurate picture. So I'm wondering, like, for a person who really is in the median in Medina, do we have any sense of how much we might be adding to the tax bill? And if the answer is no, then the answer is no. But
well, I mean, if you look at the gross revenues for City of Bellevue on the water, there is, in the off-season, there is kind of this level amount, and then it goes up a good, 60% in the summer for overall revenues they're collecting. So, I mean, that's watering landscapes, that's filling pools, that's washing your car outside in your driveway, whatever your extra summer use would be. So factoring that out, that's why I was saying at the beginning that the 195 is an average, but that average is misleading because of the usage. It would definitely be more than $195 for the people who have multiple lots and beautiful landscaping, and they're pouring lots of water on it, and they're filling their pool and all this kind of stuff. So if you're just watering your begonias on your front strip and taking a bath and a shower and drinking your water, it will definitely be much less than $195.
Can I say something? Yeah. If you do the math for 195 for 6%, right? It's only $16 a month, and people have ice cream or coffee will spend that much money. But if you decrease to 5%, it's like $15 or $14. So it's not much difference.
And I understand that some people spend that much on a cup of coffee, but not everybody does. And with everything going up, with tolls going up, with, I mean, just everything, $192 a year. I mean, I've got college tuition to pay, honestly. And they already want to raise our prices for sewer, for the rainwater that falls. And so when they raise their prices, our 6% is going to go up. And I just think 6% right out of the gate is a lot.
You know, if part of the issue is being able to give a realistic, as you say, what does the person who lives on 14th Street pay? At other points in my life where the city manager lived in the city they worked in, I'd offer to bring in my own utility bills and lay them out and say that given this is what my household utility bills are, this is what our utility taxes would be. I don't have that opportunity, you know, in Medina, but I think we could find some specific house examples and be able to say that this is what their cable TV is, this is what their water is, this is what their sewer is, their electric is, and try to give you those numbers. And, you know, part of the reason that we're wedded to the ballpark figures that we are is because that's the data we have to work with.
I mean, there's such a range of property in Medina. I mean, we talked about this a little bit with the property taxes, is that, you know, when you hit on the median, I mean, that only tells you one number for one house that's in the middle. You know, there's some real big ranges.
Yeah, well, that's why I was wondering if this number was helpful, I guess, to me in thinking about it.
I mean, I was thinking about
It's a number.
Yeah, it's a number.
And that's the other thing, is it's also, it's not an annualized payment, right? So it's, in the summer, people have higher bills, and that's when more money would also be expected.
So you know, as we were talking, I was kind of thinking we could kind of do a couple things here. It would be easy enough to factor out kind of the bulk of the increase in the summer and do what an average would look like without the spikes, what that kind of number would look like. And I can think of probably about one person who'd fall in a median house range that maybe would be willing to, you know, loan their utility bills, that we could use it as an example.
Bonnie's raising her, I mean, sorry, Ms. Gurlitz is raising her hand.
Yeah, I mean, because like Michael said, our city manager doesn't live in the city. We don't have easy access to specific bills, just overall numbers. Yeah. I mean, I know how much everybody pays all together, but what each individual and average is, I mean, I'd love to have more data.
Are you able to ask them to strip out the top 10 properties from their numbers and then give you a different number?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear all that.
Are you able to ask Bellevue to strip out the 10 largest payers and then do the average from there?
I can ask. If their software accommodates that. They have been really helpful, and they said, you know, anything we need as we're working through trying to find the right thing for our community, they'd be happy to help with. So, yeah.
I'd also like you to run the numbers at 4%, 5%, and 6%, please.
Certainly.
But by the way, I looked at the numbers, and the tax I pay on gas and power is a lot more than on water. Or actually, the total amount of bill that I pay on a yearly basis for power and gas is a lot more than water and sewer, which tells me the 6% over there is maybe 3 times or double at least the $195. So we can assume a regular household is paying at least $600 in taxes when you combine all the 6% of the cable TV, power, gas, and water now.
Yeah, I could support that assumption. Yeah.
Can you remind me, what's the annual, if we do go with 4, 5, or 6%, since we have the 6%, what's the annual amount that's going to come into our into the city hall?
180,000.
Into our operating account, not our
Right.
capital fund, anything like that. At 6%, it comes out to just a titch under 180,000 a year, and that's based on the rolling calendar year. So that's, you know, as up to date as that is.
I have a question about the timing, actually. If you go back to your agenda, Bill, and the last couple of the lines of your summary, it says that, these additional tax revenues have not been included, and will begin in the fourth quarter of 2018. How does that impact our finances in terms of, you're saying that, so it'll be the last quarter of 2018, and it's going to roll over into our budget in 2019? Or is it because of the payments that come in later?
What it is on, water sewer is only done on the quarter. They only submit on the quarter. And because we're a cash basis financial, we recognize the income when it actually comes through the door as a payment. There's a certain period of time we need to give them notification of a new tax starting or a change in the tax. So the soonest that we could implement this would be basically now to impact the fourth quarter, and we would start seeing that revenue on our books the first quarter of 19. Because we've been talking about additional revenue sources for 19 in our study sessions.
Okay. And so if the decisions were made later, it's for example as part of the budget that came in, if the decision was to make a utility tax for the water and sewer in November, it's something that you wouldn't be able to start billing until Q1 2019, and then that would be probably first payment would be in probably March, April or so of 2019.
Yeah, basically just take the timeline, add 60 days from enactment for notification, and then collection starting that month, and then whatever quarter it falls in, you get the revenue the following quarter.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
And remind me that we're not doing this to fill any particular budget gap for 2018. We're doing this to fund projected long-term budget gaps.
Correct.
So there is no urgent need for the money today.
There's really nothing we could do to actually get it today. We're thinking ahead to 19.
Thank you.
But it's for 2019.
Correct.
Right.
It is critical for 2019.
I understand, but it's not critical that we pass it today.
And can you remind us, I just don't have in front of us, what is our gap in 2019 that we're looking at just in the next budget? I just don't have it right in front of me, I'm sorry.
And I don't have it in front of me either. I'm sorry.
But it's more than that.
Yeah,
Right,
it
it's
is
more than that. So
it's definitely
even
more
if
than
we do 6%, we still have to find more money somewhere, or we have to start cutting.
When you've jumped ahead to my presentation for department, as far as the timing of budget planning versus long-term financial planning. When we get together in September for the study session, we're going to be looking at basically what have we picked up in additional revenues by collecting the one tax that we have administratively not collected that we already have on the books, any additional taxes we've been able to add, what the gap is, and that for those of you who were at the last study session, basically just a menu of items that these are potential things that we could target for reductions, and till we make the in and the out match.
I mean, we can provide you that number tomorrow. I mean, that's not-
I probably have it
Okay,
tomorrow on
okay.
my
I was gonna say, it's
computer. Because we were talking about the amounts and we were talking
Right,
about,
right.
do we do 6% here? And so I'm thinking, we have to balance the budget.
Yeah. I mean,
Which means
this
that
gets
we
us about
either
this gets us about halfway there.
halfway.
And that's after finding the efficiencies and identifying, trying to,
No, that's just
We haven't gotten that.
we haven't gone that far.
All right, and we're.
well, I know the development director has been
Right.
planning for efficiencies already.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that'll be part of the menu. And so obviously, some things will be kind of no-brainers because they'll already be in place, the efficiencies that Steve is looking at doing with his department.
So in September, we'll get some numbers on what the city has been able to, what efficiencies the city has been able to find and what that might do to
We just started drafting staff first-round budgets last week. So we haven't even finished step one.
Staff budgets are due later this month, so, we'll have more information in September.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like, if I'm reading the council correctly, that we need more data before we can make take a vote on this, and that we need to know what the whole is and whether or not we need 4, 5, 6% and be able to justify it before we take a vote. Is that consensus?
I think I'd be willing to vote on removing the sunset clause and voting on that. But everything else I'd like to table.
The removing the sunset date part?
I think I'd be willing to vote on that, but the rest I would prefer to defer.
Would that be more surgery on the ordinance than you're ready to do on the fly, or would you prefer?
Just continue it to September.
Excuse me?
Continue it to September meeting.
It's fine.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I appreciate the sentiment. I think it.
Trying to take something off the plate to get it done.
Okay, let's close the hearing, and we'll move along to the agenda bill, which is item 7.1. Is there a motion to continue to September?
I'd like to make a motion to continue the public hearing for the utility tax tolls, our September meeting.
Do we need to extend the public hearing, or are we only extending the agenda bill?
The hearing's been held. If you want to take more testimony, you should continue the hearing. If you don't need more testimony, then...
Okay, then what are we extending? Just the agenda bill?
Just the agenda bill.
That's fine.
Just
Okay.
Table the agenda bill until the September meeting.
Table this agenda bill until the September meeting.
Okay.
I'm sorry, can I suggest that we just continue it, because table technically means you need one more than a majority of the council to take it off the table. It's just easier to continue things than it is to table.
You're the boss.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's been moved to continue the agenda item 7.1 to the September meeting. Thank you, Ms. Garone. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, the city manager's report.
Good
Mr.
evening,
Sarowine.
Your Honor, members of the council. I'd just say Steve Wilcox is not feeling well this evening, so he went home earlier, so we won't be having a report from Development Services, but we'll start with Ryan Asada doing our Public Works report.
Mr. Osada, thank you so much for a great Medina Days.
Yeah.
Really appreciated you showing up for all of it, and
It wasn't me, it was
your staff did an
staff
amazing
and-
job.
yeah.
Thank you. And your dog.
Okay, so I wanted to give you an update on 84th. So currently, tomorrow they're going to start the grinding of the roadway. So there'll be some traffic impacts. We sent out an e-alert. There's a message board up. This came pretty fast. Right now, the contractors are pretty busy, and we don't get a lot of lead time on when they can be on site. The grinding company was able to mobilize tomorrow, so we told them to go ahead with it. They will be, I believe they're going to change the lights to flashing red, and there'll be a police officer tomorrow out there overriding the signal system. So be prepared for that.
They're grinding the entire, all 4 lanes at the same time?
No, the plan right now is to do half. There's a break in the pavement right about center. So they'll do 2 lanes, they'll grind 2 lanes, and then they'll grind the other 2. But coming through the intersection, they're gonna have to close it. There'll be quite a bit of equipment and disruption out there. This will continue for, I'm guessing, at the best, the next 2 weeks. if it could possibly go through the end of the month. Because what they have to do is grind, come back, do the repair. And there's a bunch of white marks out there, so they come in and dig out those areas, repair those, and then they'll come back and overlay. So the overlay goes in 2 phases also. There's quite a bit to do out there. I believe there's about 1,200 tons. So it'll take a few days.
Back to school is very soon. It's in,
School opens, Medina Elementary starts August 30th, so.
I know that's the only school we care about, but yes.
Yeah.
So what are we gonna do about that?
Hopefully we'll be done by then.
Okay,
That's my plan right now.
okay.
So I'm hoping that they're gonna be done by the end of next week. If they
Great.
can, if the general could keep the subs out there doing their work. Right now, Watson Asphalt is the asphalt company, and they're not real sure if they could pave next week or not, depending on what crews are available. And we have really tight tolerances out there, so we need them to use their new machine. So hopefully next week we'll be done.
Okay.
Can you drive on the ground, the floor before it's paved? Or
Oh yeah,
they do
once
the
once
grinding,
once it's
you can
ground
drive
down,
for
yeah,
2
you can drive on it. Yeah, I mean once they overlay it, it only takes, I guess it depends on the weather, but it depends how cool, how fast it cools, and then they'll put traffic back on it.
Question for you about dust and gravel. This is recent comments that I've heard, which I know our side is done, but the request was, can you make sure that the contractors wet down the dust and make sure that they keep the gravel out? I don't know if that's.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
The other major update on that project is the signal poles will not arrive until November. So we could be paved out by the end of this month. The sidewalks and landscaping will be completed by the end of September. Trees will go in like October, but there might be a time where there's no activity on the project. The signal system is scheduled right now to install first week of November. So we'll still have the old system and we'll block out the old system. And the new system is actually in. We're just waiting for the poles, and we can't install anything and make it live until those are.
There's no concern that one of the lights is out on the traffic light, right? I think it's the red light.
One of them is out?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I'll have a look at it.
At one point, there's a light when one shows it and the other doesn't. But then when it changes, it does work.
Okay.
Which direction?
It's coming down 24th.
From Medina?
Yeah, it's been that way for about a month.
Oh, okay.
Really?
Yep. I think it's from red to green.
Okay.
Okay. I'll have them check that.
That'd be great.
Okay. Update on the post office. The windows are done.
They look very
the-
nice.
The only thing we need to do now is the back door. I didn't have that in the original proposal, but now that everything's finished, we're looking at it. There was a couple requests to get the back door done, and looking at it further, it was rotting out. So we are going to replace that.
How much
So
is that going to cost?
About $3,500 is what I'm guessing,
Okay.
depending on what kind of retrofit we'd have to do to the door frame.
Okay.
But the door will be, glass like the front, so you can see someone coming through.
Nice.
And let's see, the sidewalk trip repair project. So last month, they completed phase 1, which was Evergreen Point Road, 24th and 12th, except for the areas that we have to remove and replace, which we'll do that with our ADA upgrade project. Phase 2, which is the packet that you have right now, They're currently working on it. They're about 30% done. They should be done in the next couple weeks, that. And then they are working on the inventory for the rest of it, which is 82nd, Overlake, 10th, and Lake Washington Boulevard. So they should have that to me in the next week. If it's within budget, we will approve it, and then hopefully they'll get that done sometime in September. And then we'll be done with all the fixable trips, you know, ½ inch or so. And then the major ones, that'll be sometime next year. We'll start working on those.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, Ryan. That's great.
And that's all I have. Any questions?
Great.
Questions for Ryan? No. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Appreciate all your work.
Sure.
So Michael one time told me never pass up an opportunity to say, once again, everything Ryan just talked about, real estate excise tax covers, yeah. You know, it is not the operating deficit we keep talking about. It's restricted on what we can use it for, just basically the kind of things Ryan spends it on. Okay, so now that I took my opportunity, the only thing I wanted to add, real brief, I mean, it's pretty straightforward in your packet. Not much, a lot of excitement in the finances of July. Same old, same old. The only thing I wanted to point out to you is I did revise the budget calendar, which is towards the end, just to show where the study sessions fall and what we're going to need to be accomplishing. So we'll have our next public hearing prior to the release of the preliminary budget, just to get some input from the community. If there's anything they want to put into the budget, you know, input they want to put in. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention to you, I've only heard back from one council member about the state auditor's exit conference meeting on Wednesday the 15th. Generally only runs about a half hour. They give a rundown of the audit if anybody's interested in coming. If you can't make it, they do put together a packet of the audit findings and just what they did and what they found. Or in our case, didn't find.
Unfortunately, I cannot attend.
Okay. Well, since the notice went out so late, I just want to make sure everybody had seen it and had a chance. So, who do we have attending? They asked me to specifically take a hand count tonight, so they know how many packets to make sure they have on Wednesday.
I would be there, but I can't on that day.
Okay, so I told them, well, I think it'll be a couple, so it looks as though we're at least safe with a couple.
Did they issue already their findings?
Huh?
Did they issue their findings?
They've told me, but they, you know, they haven't told the city as a whole.
But it was always very positive. So it's an interesting meeting, but if you haven't been there, I would recommend to attend at least one.
It is interesting.
They do it every year. There's a chance again next year.
Julie, it might be helpful if, for these kind of things, you send us a calendar invite.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
If you send us a calendar invite for these type of things, so we can accept or reject.
Yeah. We'll do.
Part of it is that the invitation actually comes from the auditor's office. So,
but I
reserving the time and the day.
Yeah,
and
so we give them a date and they give it. So.
Yeah, and now that Jen mentions it, I think I actually did that last year.
Yeah. But good idea.
Okay.
Save me a packet, please. Save me a packet, please.
Everyone will get one.
Thank you.
Okay, questions for Julie? Thank you very much.
Good evening. Medina Police Department's wrapping up a 2-week stretch. It's our busiest stretch of the year, so between Seafair and Medina days. Seafair, Thursday, Friday, were pretty quiet because of the weather, but Saturday we put about 1,500 people on the beach and parking around the community. So I was hoping Sunday would be lighter. It wasn't. We actually put closer to between 1,800 and 2,000 people at Medina Beach to see the Blue Angels. So overall, I thought it was pretty positive. Parking wasn't horrendous, even though I know there was probably some residents that would beg to differ with me on that. But considering the amount of people that we brought into the community, I thought we did very well. One of our officers started talking to some of the people wandering in for the Blue Angels and just said, hey, where are you coming from? We had people coming from Everett, Woodinville, Bothell, and when we asked why, we're on Yelp as one of the best place is on the east side behind Mercer Island. We're on TripAdvisor and Bellevue.com. So as I always like to do, an after action. There's some things for next year I think we're going to do to try to improve the traffic flow. And I'm going to be working with Ryan's guys on some of the parking issues. I'll just add, our lifeguards did a phenomenal job when I checked in with the lifeguards. I could not believe the amount of people down on the beach. So they did a great job. And Ryan's guys are always a big help, just because it's an extra set of eyes in the community that kind of helps identify some issues for us.
But Steve,
Yeah.
there was nobody up at the lid.
No, there was.
I didn't see anybody.
So I went up there on Saturday and Sunday.
Okay.
I actually, in the September packet, there's some pictures I already got.
Okay.
There's people walking down the 520 path out to watch the Blue Angels on 520.
Yeah.
And they're actually sitting up at the lid getting ready to watch the Blue Angels. It wasn't packed, but it just, no offense, I used to do the closure on the I-90 bridge,
Yeah.
and I understood when people came out there. It's actually not a bad place here. I don't know about the lid. I didn't stay up to watch the show with the lid.
I stood on the bridge both days to watch it. They're actually starting to perform more around there. 2 years ago, nothing. But this year they were much more visible up there.
But I did not get any issues from Seafair. Well, I'll just tell you, Medina Days, and we did some things differently this year with Medina Days. We did not have the issues that we've had the last 3 years since I've been here. And I don't know if it's because the word's getting out, or probably a little bit of both. The weather wasn't as good Saturday. But one thing we did differently this year is we shut the music down after the fireworks were done. And I think the big kids walking out with the grown-ups, I think, kind of helped us with that. And I think the weather. So Medina's days went well for us. And then just really the last thing, let's get questions. Jen Newton, she's the office manager for us. She started actually working for Amy before coming downstairs. She took a position with Bellevue, City of Bellevue. That's a big loss for us. For those of you who've worked with Jen, she was really overqualified for the position she was doing, but she really did a great job for us elevating the position. And bringing us up to, really, she was a leader amongst her peers. She was a resource. And so, you'll hear me say this, that's a big loss for our department. But you know what? We hire good people, and good people will step up. So I know we'll do all right. But her last day is August 22nd. We're actually doing something here August 20th in the morning. So if you can stop by, that would be great. And that's all I got.
Okay, questions?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, just a couple of additional things included in your packet. The city manager's report, I gave you once again the vision and mission statements, just to remind you what they are. We plan to be utilizing them more on city literature and getting them out in the public a little bit more, but just, so that we have approved them. As far as the city council retreat in the fall is concerned, you'll recall that we'd said we wanted to try to have a fall city council retreat. One of the things I'd suggested, and I sent out an email to you, is we already have Jurassic Parliament scheduled on the morning of Saturday, November 3rd, and a possibility of maybe having a lunch break and then having a retreat in the afternoon. Heard from a couple of you that, thanks but no thanks, that's a bit too much that day. I think a lot of it for David had to do with the fact that Washington and his beloved Stanford Cardinal are playing here in Seattle that Saturday afternoon, so I think he'll have other things he'll be dealing with. And also, by the way, the following weekend, November 10th, is actually a bye for the University of Washington's football team, so that might be a weekend when, other people, I don't know how many people have season tickets or whatever, but that weekend might be a possibility. So the other thing I'd suggested in the memo I sent out is we can use that morning of November 3rd for a retreat and maybe move the Jurassic Parliament to a weeknight or something. What do you guys think? I mean, what ideas do you have for, would you be willing to do a couple of weeknights for a retreat in Jurassic Parliament? Would you like to use November 10th? That's a little bit weird because it's kind of the Saturday of a 3-day weekend with Veterans Day on Monday. So,
it's a 4-day weekend for Bellevue High, Bellevue, so most of us will probably.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
Could we do-
juristic parliament, I have heard like 6 times. I just don't want to sit here anymore.
I've heard it probably 3 too, so.
No, but you're not attending it if you did already, right? I mean, for those of us who attended that a couple of times already, we're
Yeah,
excused.
we don't need to just sit here, be a student, because we already remember whatever they have said.
Mike looks crushed.
Well, I was gonna say, the last time we talked about this, there was, I think, a lot of support for doing the Jurassic Parliament again, and council requested that we do it, so, guys, there's nothing magic about it, I mean, we certainly don't have to do it again.
Well, the original intent was for planning commission to attend the training, and then city council was optional.
Yeah, we come to several for the planning commission as well. It's like just too many.
So as far as the council retreat, would people be open to doing something like from a 4 to 8? Like on
I can't do that.
you couldn't do that on a
No,
day off?
I'd rather keep it on a Saturday. If we don't want to do Jurassic Park, let's keep the retreat on a Saturday,
Okay,
like the plan was.
okay.
I think that's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then for those who would like to attend the Jurassic Park
Jurassic to
with the
at night.
planning commission, they can do it at night.
Okay. Well, why don't we do that then? Why don't we use the November 3rd for the city council retreat? And we'll do it from 8:30 to 12:30, so folks can make it home in time to watch the University of Washington football game if they want to. Then we'll move the Jurassic Parliament. We'll find a weeknight for that. And Amy's right. I mean, originally our intent was to try to aim it toward the Planning Commission, have council and other folks be able to be invited to come to it. The park board folks wanted to. The last time we did it, actually, I think there was almost a quorum of the park board there. So.
Yeah, and there's some people who are new and haven't had it before who wanted to take it, which is good.
So we'll work with you on putting together the agenda for the retreat. Kind of at this point, I think the big issues are going to be going back through our 2018, 2019 goals and discussing those. And also, we really want to do a deep dive on development services. Had a really good talk with Steve Wilcox this morning, and we both kind of agreed that a 2-hour study session is just not enough to get into development services and get into the whole idea of construction mitigation planning. I mean, some of the ideas he and I have been kicking around are maybe take the whole city council through the process of applying for a building permit. I mean, some of you recently have applied for building permits, but let's just say that we've acquired this piece of property across the street and we want to build a house on it. And in a half hour, we kind of take you through the process of what it would be to get a building permit. We design it so that it would be a construction mitigation plan that would have to go to the planning commission for one reason or another, and kind of walk you through that process, kind of bring everybody up to the same level of knowledge and information of how our system works. And from there, kind of morph into talking about construction mitigation planning. And, even in 3 hours at a retreat, we're still going to scratch the surface. It's going to be the beginning of a conversation. I mean, we're not going to come up with, some final results. But I think it's a way to kind of move us along the line of what I've kind of heard from just about all council members is that they really want to address this issue of construction mitigation planning and, maybe have us make some changes to the system we have. Maybe at the end of the process, we decide to leave it the way it is, but at least get into it and have that discussion. So that's kind of what we're seeing is kind of the main focus of the retreat.
Mike, is that in keeping with the goal 2 that we have, the review of the building code for improvements?
Yeah, with that actually hits a couple of the different spots on the goals. Then as far as future study sessions, right now we have 4 items which I'm calling sitting in the study session parking lot, the PSC undergrounding, the law enforcement cameras, building permits process, it's something we may deal with instead at a retreat, and the view and sunlight ordinance. So if there's additional items that council members would like to see added to the study session parking lot, you don't have to go over them tonight, send me an email, and we'll kind of keep developing that list as we go forward. What we're going to try to do is, for the next couple study sessions, obviously we're going to talk about money. But once we kind of get through the budgeting process, what I'm hoping to do is be able to take like one of these issues per study session, spend about an hour or so on it, and then have more of an open discussion for the second hour or whatever of the study session. So that's kind of the idea going forward. The short course on local planning, we've talked about this before. We'd ask that it be set, up. Included in your packet is some information on it. The short course from the folks at the Department of Commerce. We sent this out to the other points communities as well. There's an agenda on the first page, and then on the second page is the information on registering for the event. Encourage everybody who hasn't been to it to go, and encourage folks who have been to it previously to go. In a course of an evening, you'll learn a lot about the history of land use planning in the state of Washington, why we do it the way we do it, everything up to and including how to run a planning commission meeting a little bit. So we're going to encourage all of our planning commission members as well as council members to attend. And then you have the Clyde Hill traffic reports that we get each month, and then garbage cans, everybody's favorite topic. Amy and I, for the last couple of weeks, I think I said in the memo that I sent out, we're going to try to get out today. We didn't get out this morning. But for the last couple of Mondays, we've gone out and counted garbage cans, and we have sent out letters a couple times now to the folks predominantly on Evergreen Point Road and up on the point, and then around the corner in Alex's neighborhood, are kind of the areas that we've hit. And we have noticed a significant decrease in the number of cans. Having said that, the folks next to Shuri haven't quite got the message yet. So our next step is that we will be putting some notes on individual garbage cans later this week. There's a couple of streets up, especially along the northern part of Evergreen Point, that there's garbage cans, and then there's 4 or 5 houses off of the private road. So we sent letters to everybody on the private road. Maybe we can create some peer pressure for everybody to pull their cans out. We definitely heard from the folks who did take their cans back to their house every day, saying that, why did you send me this letter? I'm really diligent about making sure I move my cans. But we think we're making progress. But you said we still have a little ways to go. There was a couple of emails, I think, that went out to council members about fines and the effect of fines and the amount it would cost people and things. Understand that we kind of view this the same way that the cops do speeding tickets. We don't want to write tickets. We want compliance, and the goal is to get people to move their garbage cans, not to generate a lot of money, and that's kind of our way of looking at it. So. As I say, council wanted this to be a priority, and Amy and I are actually having some fun with it. So we'll see what we can do about the rest of the garbage cans.
Amy looks absolutely like.
Yeah, Amy looks thrilled.
I think there was something that was achieved, actually, because every day I walk by Sherry's home. The cans are still there, but the number that was stamped on the cans was removed. And I used to read on the numbers what is the property address, because how would you know who they belong to? So obviously they wipe them out, so you can't tell anymore.
Well, that's interesting, because I know Republic puts it on, like when you get a new one, they'll write it on.
Yeah, they write
And
it.
so they're deliberately known.
So my question is like, how do you know which one? Because there is 10 of them all the time. And how do you know who they belong to? So I don't envy you on that challenge, basically.
Well, we're trying. We'll keep working on it.
Could we confiscate them?
I'll let the city attorney answer that question.
That's okay. You know what? I'll retract the question.
I did actually talk with, to your point, I did actually talk with the garbage company and say, every can, even the ones that don't have addresses on them, seem to have some sort of a code number that seems unique to that individual can. Would you guys be willing to share with me who those cans have been delivered to the houses? And they said, that's not information we're going to.
Because they know. Because if somebody uses something improper in the can, you get charged extra $2, $3. So they know every can who it belongs to.
Yeah, they're not going to be willing to share that information. And last, just go through the future agenda. Well, on Thursday, we're doing the interviews for the planning managers. For those of you that volunteered to participate, thank you very much. And then coming up next month, we have a regular city council meeting on September 10th. And one of the things you're going to be hearing a lot about in the next 6 months is low impact development. Our friends at the Department of Ecology require that all cities go through a process of looking at how their development regulations work in relation to low impact development. Low-impact development is everything from making sure that you don't have runoff from properties, how much soil gets removed during construction methods. There's a lot of facets to low-impact development. And from a staff perspective, we're looking at this as kind of an opportunity to do what we talked about at our retreat. And that is to not give a big issue to the Planning Commission and say, Planning Commissioners, deal with this and come back with your finished product. And 2 years later, they come back with their finished product. And the City Council says, that has nothing to do with what we wanted, and end up voting and doing something entirely different. So this is an opportunity to not do that. What we're hoping to do is to have a kickoff meeting between 5:30 and 6:30 before your September council meeting. We'll invite the Planning Commissioners to that. We'll have our consultants here on low-impact development and have them give a presentation so Planning Commission and City Council all hear the same message the same way at the same time. And then the Planning Commissions will start working on it first. But we're going to try to have as many opportunities as we can find for the Planning Commission when they reach kind of milestones to have that information come back to the City Council review it, and as much conversation and as much work together as we possibly can on this issue. But it is something that for the next 6-12 months is going to be important for us to deal with, and I'm not going to get too much into it tonight because you have the kickoff meeting in September. But as I said, it's kind of our first opportunity to try to have the joint work of the Planning Commission and the City Council be just that, joint work. And then the only other thing I'd want to touch on is, I know it's always tough to schedule things around Christmas, so just highlight the December 6, 2018 Employee and Volunteer Appreciation Lunch. Encourage everybody to put that on your calendar early, because if you're like me, your December calendar already looks like a Roche ink blot test. And with that, I'll conclude my report, Your Honor.
I have a question for Mike, though. On 28th, across the street from the school, there's commuter parking, which I don't have a problem with people parking there for commuting purposes, but when the school opens, that might become an issue. And I feel bad, but if they're a resident, maybe we also do permit parking there and we give residents commuter permit parking, because I'm just worried about the school, because during school year, that becomes a place where a lot of people park for the school. But I don't know. I'm torn about it, because they're really out of the way, but it's the school thing.
Let me talk with Steve about it, and we'll see what we can do.
Okay.
I have a suggestion for a study session also, which would be the form and process for city manager evaluations, and making that a collaborative process with the city manager and the council, and perhaps having a formal understanding of how that process works.
I would welcome that.
And one of the things we were thinking about doing as well, and I talked to Julie about this, was moving up the evaluation. So instead of having the budget discussion and then the year ends and then we're into the next year and then we give you the evaluation, and it should be, a more consistent.
And I have looked around a little bit online for models and things like that. I know some cities have council members fill out different forms at a 6-month mark and at a 1-year mark, and sometimes it goes one way and then the other way, but as in from the manager to the council at one point and from the council to the manager at another point. So I think there are different forms out there that we could use, but getting the timing right will be a part of that.
Yeah, and Mr. Marcos had a good form that has been used in the past that we could leverage from.
Especially if council is willing to contribute.
Yes.
Was that point?
Yes.
Getting information.
Yeah. It's better if the whole thing process. Yes?
I just want everybody to look before it goes away. But don't look at have your back. You have to.
What? Oh, wow.
The red sun.
Oh, that's beautiful. Can we change the seating the way
Yeah.
Okay.
We have one more.
So we've got Any other questions for Mike Sauerwein?
So I'm going to be away on September 10th. I'm traveling out of the US. So we can either change the date, like you guys tried to do once, or you excuse me, I won't be here.
Thank you.
It's kind of an important meeting, isn't
I
it?
think so. Yeah, you're not changing it. I'm just,
No, I'm
being
saying we could
sarcastic.
try to, we could see if there's,
no, that's,
no? Okay,
I don't think we should do that. I mean, the
Okay.
meetings are
Okay.
when they are
There's
supposed
all right,
to be.
thank you.
Can I say something?
Yes, and then we're going to go to public comment, so.
Yeah, I know people may feel that 6% is too high, but I have talked to city council people on different city. Everybody, it's the same as budget crunch because city is required to have balance of budget. And so I talked to Mercer Island. They have much more increase, even tax levy and everything, and said our finance director was in their meeting. So I want to say Julie did a great job to reach out to different city to look at different ways to get the balance of budget. And so she's very diligent, try to get this done. And so we have to think about a bigger picture instead of just nitty-gritty on something that residents feels uncomfortable with because of the numbers. But we have to make the number meet. It's our duty.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a good point.
Every city is doing that, and,
Yeah.
and our finance director is doing very, very well to do that.
Okay. So I think that's a good point. Ms. Keller, the comments were not, the questions about this were not reflective of you at all. We all really appreciate the work that, and the diligence that you're putting in. Okay. Okay, if no other questions for Mr. Sauerwein, we'll move into the public comment period. I have one speaker card. It's from Barbara Britt Cole.
Yes.
Okay.
77. I have some pictures that I developed this afternoon.
Okay.
They're in color, so I don't know. She's going to help me. Somehow we're going to make this work. I've never done this before, so I thought I'd be talking to the Planning Commission that didn't meet today. So I'll just say my little piece of information here. I noticed on our walk a big, huge hole in the ground on Evergreen Point Road, just down from what's his name? Bill Gates' house. And it's on Evergreen Point Road between Bill Gates' house, and there's this big, huge hole that I've never seen in my entire life. It is probably, what would you say, 25 feet deep?
Deeper than that.
And it's his basement, his first floor. We saw the plans. And I'm very concerned. That's a big concern of mine, that the neighborhood is turning into, it's for sale, that anybody wants to buy. They can bulldoze a house down for $5 million. They can bulldoze a house down to have property to build a huge hole. That cat is 3 times as tall as I am. I saw a garbage dumpster that's 3 times as tall as I am. And John Ridgway took a picture of me, and I didn't get that one developed, and it's not necessary, but there were beautiful palm trees on top of that. And this really hurts me. I've lived in the neighborhood for 30 years, and I'll just read you what I wrote. I've lived here for 30 years, and there are old rules and new rules. And now you can make noise from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and I just about went crazy when the neighbors across the street, she's gone, and the noise starts all day from early morning until 5 or 6 o'clock at night. I complained, and I found out that there's nothing I can do because there are new rules. Well, what happens if you live here for 30 years? I was blessed to have my parents buy me a house, and I've been here for 30 years. I no longer feel like I can afford to live here because of all the new money from outside this country that's changing my whole neighborhood. The house across the street sold for $2.3 million to people who don't speak our language, and it really bothers me. So that's one of my concerns. So there are old rules and new rules. I have not been given the old rules or the new rules, And I thought maybe I could be grandfathered or grandmothered into this situation. And I don't know who to talk to, and maybe you can help me afterwards. My property tax has increased 13%. My other concern is of this hole in the ground that is gigantic. I can't even believe it. They're tearing trees down in my tree city. This was my city, but it's no longer my city. I don't feel like I even belong here, and I can't afford to. I was blessed to be given my house 30 years ago by my parents, and on a retired teacher's salary, a pension, and Social Security. I'm not sure at $40,000 a year how much longer I can stay in my house that was given to me. I plan to live there forever, and I love it. It's 1,300 square feet. This house has a hole for the basement, and then the house itself is going to be 12,000 square feet, and that's a lot bigger than mine. Do we have a way to move, are all three showing?
So,
This is just
so
one.
we need to,
Put one
so
picture
the,
over the other.
so thank you very much for your comments.
I'm almost through.
We're, yeah,
Thank you very much. I was trying to, thank you so much. And does that show all of them? So we've got a big hole in our neighborhood. I don't know how many people are aware of it. And these people, my neighbors are the two richest men in the world. I'm sure the increases, the 6% in the utility, and my property taxes that are 13% more are not a concern to them. I thank Jennifer for your interest in our neighbors and me who live here. I do not have endless deep pockets to support all these tax increases. I'm a retired teacher who gave my life to teaching children, and I don't, like I said, I have to balance a budget too, besides you balancing this for us. Thank you very much.
thank you very much. And if you have questions about the building code and that sort of thing, we can make staff available to you, so.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah.
I just don't know who to talk to.
Yeah.
I've lived here for 30 years, but I've never come here to complain or voice my concerns. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So Mike Sauerwein's the city manager, and he can talk with you after.
Should be over with now. I mean, the meeting.
No, I was just saying that you can talk with him after the meeting?
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll do that.
okay, thanks a lot.
Mike, Jessica and I were both still on planning commission when this one was approved. I mean, it's been a while, but I don't remember that it was supposed to be 12,000 feet.
So during, we need to be consistent with respect to public comment period, and with respect to public comment period, we're not supposed to have discussion. So if we want to go back into, do you want to go back into city business and open a discussion? I'm just trying to be consistent with.
I understand that, but we also don't no longer discuss a lot of other things either. So I was just trying to be sensitive to our constituents' concerns.
I agree, but if someone could make a motion to move back into city business?
No, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Oh,
Yes.
before there's a second,
Yes.
I'd like to ask the council for a quick executive session, up to 15 minutes, to discuss litigation under RCW 4230-110-1I.
Okay. If there's no objection, we'll move into executive session. Hearing none, we'll move into executive session for
Up
the
to 15
RCW
minutes.
for up to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, the public has. Okay, we're coming out of executive session. Did I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you all. And Mike, thank you for a long week of Medina Days. I really appreciate you being at absolutely everything. You're amazing.
Yeah, I enjoy Medina Days because it's when I get to meet the other 3,000 people who live here. God bless the folks that come to every city council meeting. It's nice spending time with the other people.
Okay.